It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. See, I can tell you. I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell. Our country is behind the United Nations 100%. I think the potential of the United Nations is incredible.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Tuesday evening to you. I'm Maritza Giorgio here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day, from criticism of the White House's new guidance on acetaminophen and pregnancy to the return of Jimmy Kimmel to the airwaves Tuesday night. But first, this morning, we took a look at President Donald Trump's address to the United Nations.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. And I don't mind making this speech without a teleprompter, because the teleprompter is not working. I feel very happy to be up here with you nevertheless, and that way you speak more from the heart. I can only say that whoever's operating this teleprompter is in big trouble. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen, but she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the 2 things I got from the United Nations: a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much. And by the way, it's working now. It just went on. Thank you. I think I should just do it the other way. It's easier. Thank you very much. I didn't think of it at the time because I was too busy working to save millions of lives. That is the saving and stopping of these wars. But later I realized that the United Nations wasn't there for us. They weren't there. I thought of it really after the fact, not during these negotiations, which were not easy. That being the case, what is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential. But it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war. Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the #1 political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. It's uncontrolled. Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders. Let us all work together to build a bright, beautiful planet, a planet that we all share, a planet of peace and a world that is richer, better, and more beautiful than ever before. That can happen. It will happen. It will happen, and I hope it can happen and start right now, right at this moment. We'll turn it around. We're going to make our countries better, safer, more beautiful. We're going to take care of our people. Thank you very much. It's been an honor. God bless the nations of the world. Thank you very much. Bye.
All right, President Trump addressing the 80th anniversary of the United Nations General Assembly, going way over time, speaking for about an hour. So let's sort of dissect this and get an overall view of this. Let's bring in our White House correspondent, Haley Bull, for us, who has also been listening to this hour-long speech. And Haley, I mean, it seemed a lot of bit about, I guess you could say maybe criticizing the UN, and it didn't seem a lot about addressing the next 80 years of the UN. But what was your take from what you have heard today?
Holly, it was really twofold. What we heard was President Trump touting what he views as U.S. strength, as well as his own agenda in this second term in office, while at the same time railing against the United Nations and leaning into sharp differences in U.S. policy. In particular, the president blaming the United Nations for what he called empty words and not helping solve global conflicts, as well as for migration issues in particular. President Trump listed off a number of what he views as achievements in his administration, what in some ways sounded like a State of the Union speech to foreign leaders. In particular, he touted, and this was expected, his efforts to solve conflicts, while at the same time he highlighted two that have yet to reach a resolution: the conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, but did not offer any new positions on that front. It was notable when we look at Gaza, as many nations have moved this week to recognize a Palestinian state, including major U.S. allies. Trump reiterated his disagreement, criticizing it as a move rewarding Hamas, while doubling down on his call for the war to end and all hostages to be released.
We have to stop the war in Gaza immediately. We have to stop it. We have to get it done. We have to negotiate, immediately have to negotiate peace. We got to get the hostages back. We want all 20 back.
When it comes to Ukraine, he notably said if Russia won't make a deal to end the war, the U.S. is ready to impose what he called a round of powerful tariffs, he said, would stop the bloodshed, but at the same time reiterated his calls for European allies to do more to cut off the supply of Russian oil, but also notably called out not only India, but also China. When we go on to talk about immigration, Trump touting his administration's policies on that front, blaming the United Nations for uncontrolled immigration, what he termed. He also encouraged other countries, particularly Europe, to take a tougher stance on migration. This is something we have heard him do before, something where there are some policy differences, but notably warned countries that they are, quote, going to hell. Certainly a strong statement in front of this international body. And as climate action has been a central focus for many member nations, Trump railed against renewable energy and climate change in particular, calling it the greatest con job. That is certainly significant, as he also defended this administration's actions on that front. He also defended tariff measures, as many nations in the audience are navigating how to broker deals with the United States and the new tariff rates that are set for many of them. One of the countries with the highest rates, Brazil, and in a bit of news there, President Trump saying that he and Brazil's leader have agreed to meet next week, Holly. Now, after this speech, there's still a lot to come. President Trump is also expected to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines, as well as leaders from a number of Arab nations as well, Holly.
Yeah, I found it very interesting. He sort of reprimanded the UN, and the quote that really stuck out for me is he asked, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of the UN? Basically saying that the U.S. could not count on them.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
It can't be understated what this system is capable of doing. Like I said, it can take down cell towers, so then no longer can people communicate, right? You can't use Waze, you can't use text message, you can't use your cell phone. And if you coupled that with some sort of other event, right?
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories.
A federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to restore $500 million in grant funding to UCLA. The government froze the money over claims the university violated civil rights laws related to anti-Semitism and affirmative action. The judge said the administration likely broke federal rules by not explaining why it cut the funding. The grants include medical research into Parkinson's disease and cancer treatment. The Secret Service has dismantled a massive hidden telecom network in New York that could have crippled cell towers and jammed 911 calls. Investigators found more than 300 SIM servers with more than 100,000 SIM cards located within 35 miles of the United Nations. This network could have blacked out cellular service, especially during the UN General Assembly. Authorities suspect nation-state actors are behind the operation. Officials say they have not uncovered a direct plot against the UN assembly.
Let me just explain that this is no longer a threat. We've taken this network down. Could there be others, right? It would be unwise to think that there's not other networks out there being made in other cities in the United States, and that's going to be part of our investigation. We're going to run down every single lead.
Scripps News investigative reporter Patrick Terpstra is in our D.C. newsroom. And Patrick, what exactly did the Secret Service find?
Well, they're calling it a major hidden encrypted network of telecommunication devices discovered in the New York area. We've got some images of exactly what it is they found, appearing to be in some sort of apartment, again, within 35 miles of the New York City area. There you see it right there. These are being described as SIM servers as well as SIM cards, 100,000 of them. Also, those cards, many of them had not yet been activated. Apparently, the possibility of doubling or tripling the size of this covert criminal network. Again, found within very close proximity to the United Nations. The head of the Secret Service making clear that they wanted to disrupt this as quickly as possible, given that that UN conference was going on this week, but also making clear that there was not actually a specific plot against the United Nations at this time. They are making clear that this could have caused significant disruption to communications in New York City, but also beyond, across the country. They say that known cartels and terrorist groups were using this technology to communicate essentially anonymously, but that they also could have weaponized this technology to try to interfere with wireless communications, data, cell phones, potentially able to block cell phone calls from being made and from data from being used in New York City. You can imagine what this might have meant to access for EMS, 911 services, also with the power to generate massive amounts of text messages and facts that could light up phones all across the country. Apparently, as many as 30 million text messages could be sent using this type of technology that had been discovered in a nefarious way. Listen to how one Secret Service member described exactly what it is the threat could have been here.
It can't be understated what this system is capable of doing. Like I said, it can take down cell towers, so then no longer can people communicate, right? You can't use Waze, you can't use text message, you can't use your cell phone. And if you coupled that with some sort of other event, right, associated with UNGA, or, use your imagination there, they could be catastrophic to the city.
Authorities say that they discovered this network while investigating telecommunication threats against senior government officials. They did not name exactly who that was, but Holly, this is the sort of threat that the Secret Service and the federal government has been concerned about for many years. Essentially, foreign state actors, foreign governments trying to use technology against this country, and doing so using underground infrastructure like these SIM servers and SIM cards. Holly.
Wow. And Patrick, has the Secret Service said about who they think might be responsible for building this covert network?
A little bit. They're saying that it is known criminal groups, terrorist groups, cartels, but also foreign governments. The question of exactly which countries were involved in this, that's something that they have not confirmed to us yet. But they say right now the goal is to go through those 100,000 SIM cards forensically, trying to get as much information and evidence as they can before going after whoever it is they believe is responsible for this. Holly.
Coming up on Today As It Happened, President Donald Trump made dramatic claims about the use of Tylenol during pregnancy. Do those claims hold up to scrutiny?
To be very clear, we do not have any evidence that Tylenol or acetaminophen causes autism.
Scripps News correspondent Maura Barrett has the breakdown coming up next. The Trump administration is pushing an unproven link between the active ingredient in Tylenol and autism. The FDA is now advising doctors to limit the use of acetaminophen during pregnancy, alleging the drug can be associated with a very high risk of autism. Now, during an announcement yesterday, President Donald Trump said pregnant women should not take Tylenol or acetaminophen, but doctors across a variety of respected medical organizations say the research shows the medication is safe during pregnancy. Scripps News business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett is live in Denver for us. Good afternoon, Maura. Hey, the White House offered little scientific backing here to this new claim. So help walk us through how we got here. Where did this come from?
Well, Maritza, President Trump point blank said in that announcement yesterday that he was making these claims based on how he felt. And so the conversation he was having in this announcement ultimately was vastly different than what the FDA was recommending. But the problem is he's making these claims, and that's where the misinformation and interpretation of what the administration's stance is on what could potentially cause autism. Now, they're leaning heavily on a new report that came out of Mount Sinai that did note that prenatal exposure to acetaminophen may increase the risk of neurodevelopmental disorders like autism or other things like ADHD. But the report also specifically noted that further research is needed to confirm the associations and ultimately determine causality. And I think that's the key point here in this conversation, and the confusion is the difference between association or correlation and causality when it comes to linking certain factors to ultimate diagnoses. And so I want you to hear from an OBGYN kind of breaking down what those key differences are and the lack of evidence that surrounds this announcement.
To be very clear, we do not have any evidence that Tylenol or acetaminophen causes autism. Tylenol taken during pregnancy does not cause autism. This is incredibly frustrating for me as a physician, but my patients are scared. They're hurting. This is where it gets tricky. And association means that if people take Tylenol in pregnancy, they may have a child who has autism. But association does not mean that something causes something. Ice cream is associated with drowning. It doesn't cause you to drown. They're just two things that are present when the weather is warm.
So I think that analogy is really helpful when you're thinking about the idea of association. It's also important to highlight that in a lot of this pregnancy research that exists right now, a lot of it's observational studies. And so that means that there's not room to factor in genetic or environmental factors in how their scientific research is playing out. And so we've seen both domestic and international medical entities push back against yesterday's announcement. The WHO, for example, as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American College of OBGYNs. The Tylenol maker, Kenvue, also very aggressively pushing back, writing in part in a statement that the facts are that over a decade of rigorous research endorsed by leading medical professionals and global health regulators confirms there is no credible evidence linking acetaminophen to autism. And so doctors, medical entities pointing to the fact that they typically need years and dozens of medical studies to ultimately come to a conclusion like this. And across the board, they're saying that there just is not that evidence, and there's not a lot still known about what causes autism. But the vague information we do have from these approved studies is that it's leaning towards mostly genetic, so not necessarily other drugs or vaccines, as we see so heavily pushed by this administration, Maritza.
Yeah, and Maura, I saw so many of my mom friends on social media talking about how maybe they had children with autism and never took acetaminophen during pregnancy and vice versa. And they also commented about this next thing I'm going to ask you about. Doctors acknowledge that they're always open to seeing scientific studies and findings evolve, right? But their point is that the science here does not have enough information to support causation at this time, like you just laid out. And what's more, they're warning about dangerous ripple effects of guidance like this. And I know some of the mothers who I know talked about very difficult pregnancies when they really relied on something like acetaminophen to get them through it. So talk about what those dangerous ripple effects look like.
Well, there's the medical ripple effects in terms of what you just started talking about there, in the sense of Tylenol is approved for safe use for people who are pregnant while other drugs aren't. And a lot of the times when there is sickness, there's fever, there's other pain that carrying mothers are experiencing, it's actually more dangerous for them and for the baby to not take something like Tylenol. So there's a medical factor there. But then at the same time, there's the ripple effect of this blame game that comes into play, saying to pregnant mothers, oh, if you chose to do this and now your baby has autism, that this is your fault. And then that just further stigmatizes the diagnosis as it is and suggests that there's something severely wrong with kids who are born with autism. And so it's this ripple effect, both medically and societally, quite frankly, that comes from conversations like this. And it just causes further confusion for people who are looking to get pregnant or might currently be pregnant because there's so much conflicting information. And that's the kind of the trend of these stories as I keep covering them, is that there doesn't seem to be one trusted source of medical information. The pillars, the standards that usually come from the administration is not something that people feel comfortable consulting anymore. I think it's also important to highlight one of the key points coming out of yesterday's announcement that's causing even more confusion is the option of a cancer drug, a vitamin B supplement, essentially, leucovorin, as an option for treating autism. Doctors I've spoken to, other medical reports I've read, is saying that all of this is very anecdotal, is very premature. And so similarly to the study that the FDA is citing around the ties to autism and Tylenol, there's just anecdotal conversation about it all right now, but it's not scientifically to say that this supplement is a good solution for people looking to treat autism. So all in all, just a lot of confusion swirling after all this, Maritza.
Coming up on Today As It Happened, late night host Jimmy Kimmel is set to return to airwaves Tuesday night. Stay with us for Scripps News correspondent Stephanie Liebergen's reporting on why ABC is resuming production and why you still might not be able to watch the program live in some parts of the country. That's after the break. Watching Today As It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. Let's jump right in. ABC is reinstating Jimmy Kimmel Live. The network suspended the host after comments he made about the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Now, that move sparked a fierce debate over free speech, and Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen joins me now at the desk with some details. So, Stephanie, we know Jimmy Kimmel is going to be back on the air tonight, but the asterisk says not everybody will be able to watch him. So explain that.
Right. So not everyone will be able to watch him live on their local ABC station. So the normal ABC streaming options that they put out, presumably ABC will continue to do those from their entertainment division. But the two major media ownership groups, Sinclair and Nexstar, who came out against Kimmel's show and initially announced plans to preempt last week, have said they are not going to resume airing Kimmel's show this evening. Now, Sinclair, in their demands last week, they wanted Kimmel to make a direct apology to the Kirk family. They wanted him to make a donation to the family and to Turning Point USA, Kirk's organization, and they wanted formal discussions with ABC. We know, at least from what Sinclair said today, that those discussions with ABC are ongoing, as they say they're going to evaluate the show's potential return. But these two media ownership groups, Nexstar and Sinclair, own ABC affiliate stations in about 60 TV markets across the country. So we're talking about some major cities. Here in Washington, D.C., are ABC affiliates owned by Sinclair. Other major cities that are not going to see Jimmy Kimmel live this evening on their local station: Seattle, Portland, Oregon, Nashville, Salt Lake City, New Orleans, St. Louis, Tulsa, Oklahoma. So big and small markets across the country are going to not see Kimmel live on their local TV stations. Streaming, it's still a little unclear for local streaming providers like a Hulu or a YouTube TV that's typically tied to what's airing in your local market with like NFL football games. Unclear right now if that streaming is going to be available for those viewers or if there's other streaming options through those platforms that viewers will be able to take advantage of.
So it seems like we've seen so many reactions across the board from when this first happened last week. What are we hearing right now, both from the administration, but also, I know some lawmakers have brought up some other concerns about how potential mergers and rulings from the SEC might play into this.
Exactly. So we haven't heard anything from the president or the vice president just yet. We have heard from the FCC commissioner, Brendan Carr. He put out a post on social media where he was stressing the support for local ownership groups taking control over what they air in their local market. So this is a portion of that post on X, where he said, notably, this is the first time recently that any local TV stations have pushed back on a national programmer like Disney. And that is a good thing because we want empowered local TV stations. And after all, local TV stations, not the national programmers, have public interest obligations, and they should be making decisions in their view that meets the needs of their local communities. Local broadcasters, your big four networks have this different set of rules than cable and then streaming and then the internet. And so they have a public interest duty, which is what Brennan Carr was referencing there in that post. But we have seen posts from people who, from the other side of the aisle. We got a response within the last 30 minutes from Senator Elizabeth Warren, who criticizes Sinclair and Nexstar, saying that their decision to continue to preempt Kimmel, she says, reeks of corruption, and she notes that both of those ownership groups have business pending before the FCC that is awaiting government approval. So trying to draw that connection that a lot of people were making last week when all of this first started, that these local ownership groups might be trying to keep the Trump administration happy, knowing that they have business that they are waiting for approval on.
Yeah, I think, that's definitely been a part of conversations I've seen around this. Okay, but let's get down to brass tacks. Tell us about the show tonight, because a lot other rumors going around online speculated about who the guests might be, but sounds like those rumors are false.
Those rumors you heard about California Governor Gavin Newsom certainly don't appear to be true.
Right.
According to what is officially on ABC's website right now, it looks like Glenn Powell, the actor, is going to be the guest this evening.
Glenn Powell,
yes.
Celebrity hunk Glenn Powell?
Yes,
Okay.
indeed. He's got a movie coming out in November, so that could be, his reason for being the guest tonight. There's a musical guest, Sarah McLachlan. We have also, it's worth noting, Jimmy Kimmel himself broke his silence on social media within the last hour, putting a post out on Instagram and on Facebook with a picture of him and Norman Lear and the simple caption saying, "Missing this guy today." Certainly seems Kimmel and Norman Lear had a personal relationship. Kimmel did a nice tribute for him when Lear died in 2023. But also worth noting that Norman Lear was involved in a lawsuit against the FCC based on the First Amendment in the 1970s. There were new rules about what they were calling family viewing hours, putting rules on what networks could air in those prime time, like 7 to 9 p.m.
Sure.
Family evening hours. Norman Lear was involved with the Writers Guild and others in the lawsuit, ultimately winning in court that those restrictions violated First Amendment freedom of speech. So interesting connection there with what's going on today.
With Sarah McLachlan, too, she pulled out of a performance over an ABC performance over the Jimmy Kimmel suspension. So I mean, there's something there, and I'm curious if we'll see them talk about it. So we'll find out tonight.
And what will Jimmy say himself about all of this controversy and his 4 shows that he was off the air and unable to produce? So a lot of eyes on that.
Well, Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen, thank you. A jury came back quickly to find the man accused of trying to assassinate Donald Trump last year at his Florida golf course guilty. Early reporting shows that Ryan Routh tried to stab himself in the neck after the verdict. He allegedly grabbed a pen and tried to harm himself. Marshals were able to stop him and drug him out of the courthouse. Now, Routh represented himself in court. He told jurors he could have shot Trump or a Secret Service agent if that's what he wanted to do, but prosecutors presented evidence they say show Routh wanted Donald Trump dead and spent weeks plotting the attack.
Well, I'm very appreciative of the justice that was given and the way it was handled by Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche and everybody that it's been, and their team of people. It was really well handled, and it's very important. You can't let things like that happen. Nothing to do with me, but a president or even a person, you can't allow that to happen. And so justice was served, and we'll see what happens. But I very much appreciate the judge and jury and everybody on that. It was so professionally handled.
In other headlines, dozens of people along the Utah and Arizona border report getting the measles. Officials say most of these cases involve children who are not vaccinated. Some people may have been exposed at a high school, others reportedly at a Chick-fil-A. Health officials are advocating for the MMR vaccine, which is 97% effective against the highly contagious measles virus. And Major League Baseball today approving the use of automated ball strike systems starting next year. Think robot umpires. Human umpires will still call balls and strikes, but pitchers can challenge up to 2 calls per game. They have been testing this out in the minor leagues for a couple of years. Up next on Today as It Happened.
Mr. President, do you think that NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace?
Yes, I do.
Mr. President.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. I'm Maritza Giorgio here with your daily rundown of today's top stories. President Trump addressed the United Nations General Assembly today in a stump-style speech, including touting that he ended 7 conflicts. The president told the assembly it failed to live up to its tremendous potential. He said the United States is prepared to impose stiff tariffs against Russia and criticized countries that bought oil from Russia. So we have team coverage on this important UN meeting, including comments from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky just a short time ago. Scripps News International correspondent Jason Bellini joins us now live from the United Nations headquarters, and White House correspondent Haley Bull is on the North Lawn. So Haley, let's start with you, because the president put out a post on Truth Social a short time ago, a pretty big change, a big departure in tone regarding the war between Ukraine and Russia in that post. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, Maritza, this is a significant statement from President Trump. One appears to give a vote of confidence that Ukraine can take territory back, and it is the first of this nature that we have heard from President Trump. The president writing on Truth Social that he thinks Ukraine, with EU support, is, quote, in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form, going on to say the borders from when the war started is, quote, very much an option. And again, this is the first time we have publicly heard President Trump indicate that Ukraine may be able to recapture territory, as officials have repeatedly said each side would likely have to cede some land. The president in that same post saying that, quote, Putin and Russia are in big economic trouble, and now is the time for Ukraine to act, going on to say when the Ukrainians learn more that perhaps Ukraine, quote, would be able to take back their country in its original form, and who knows, maybe even go further than that. Trump reiterating this position earlier today while meeting with France's president. Listen.
It could be that Russia's a paper tiger. I don't know what they are, but 3.5 years of fighting and killing everybody, of killing 7,000 people a week. For nothing. So it's a very sad situation, but most of you have seen the recent statement I put out a little while ago, and I'm glad you got it. But I feel that way. I really do feel that way. Let them get their land back.
Now, Maritza, the timing of this tone comes as the president has threatened further economic penalties against Russia absent a deal to end the war, something he has threatened for some time now but not moved forward with acting on beyond imposing tariffs against India for its purchases of Russian oil, something he reiterated during his UN General Assembly speech today as well.
And Jason, you've spent a lot of time on the ground in Ukraine. I know there are a lot of threads to pull on in that post that the president put on Truth Social, but let's start with this. Is it possible for Ukraine to regain the land it has so far lost to Russia?
Hi, Maritza. Well, until today, that was not even part of the discussion. And since that summit in Alaska with Putin, what they were talking about was Ukraine having to withdraw from territories that were still under its control. But this Truth Social post, and this happened just as I was inside that press conference with President Zelensky, who was seeming more upbeat than he typically is after these meetings. This was his 4th meeting with President Trump since he took office. But let's unpack this one statement that Trump said in Truth Social, that Ukraine will win back all of Ukraine back in its original form. Back in its original form, that would include Crimea. This is an area that Ukraine has always said they want to get back, but it seemed just an impossibility because Russia's been entrenched there. It seems that, and it appears that Zelensky and his team shared information with Trump and his team to indicate that things are going a lot better on the battlefield. And then one other point I want to make here, because Trump made this point, and here's Zelensky using almost identical words, talking about Russia's economy being in bad shape. And you had Trump in his posts pointing to the gasoline lines in Russia, suggesting that people are going to wake up there and realize that this war is costing them way too much. And one of the reasons why they're, not one of the reasons, the reason they're waiting in line is because Ukraine has been clobbering Russian oil infrastructure, their ability to produce oil and gas. They've been doing that every day, Maritza.
Yeah, and Jason, we have a spokesperson for the State Department coming on in about a half hour, and I plan to ask him about that question about Crimea, if that's included in the president's post. Haley, I know you wanted to step in.
Yeah, Maritza, and piggybacking off what Jason is saying too, one of the things that's really notable in this is throughout this second term in the Trump administration, we have heard him at times take a more critical tone towards Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. That is something that we have not heard today, as we are seeing this shift in tone and trying to dissect what particularly was the piece of information behind it. Trump has focused his criticism in these remarks really solely on Putin and Russia, as he has repeatedly said in recent days that Putin has let him down. Just last week, though, Trump had said that Zelensky needed to make a deal. That's not the same message we are hearing from him today.
Okay, Scripps News international correspondent Jason Bellini, White House correspondent Haley Bull, thank you both. You're watching Today As It Happened. We'll be back in a moment.
It's year 11 of one of the most glutton-filled celebrations of weight gain in America. Yeah, we're talking about Fat Bear Week. With names like Chunk and Grazer, these massive brown bears are gearing up for winter. And so it just may be the distraction we all need right now. So let's figure out how we can get involved by bringing in our guest, Mike Fitz, resident naturalist with explore.org. Mike, thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome, and I'm happy to distract everybody from everything else.
I'm full confession. Our director, Emma, and I have been watching nothing but this all morning long, okay? So fascinating. Let's talk about this. Katmai National Park, where over 4 million acres serve as basically a luxury buffet for more than 2,200 brown bears. We call them the VIPs of the bear world, right? They become fall's version of March Madness. So please explain what Fat Bear Week is all about.
Fat Bear Week is a virtual competition where people choose who they think is the fattest and most successful Brooks River bear of the year. Watching bears at Brooks River is pretty unique because we get to see bears not only in early summer when they're skinny, getting their first salmon meals, but also in late summer after they've fattened up for winter hibernation. And we can watch these bears anytime, in fact, on live webcams on explore.org right now if you want to get to know some of the bears. So, the voting in some of the first round matches just opened about 20 minutes ago.
And actually, we are showing our viewers a live look at the cameras right now, which they can also stream as well. So how did this all get started?
Well, when I was a ranger at Katmai National Park, we always talked about how bears need to get fat to survive. They hibernate in winter. And they survive on body fat. Body fat is the fuel that allows them to go about 6 months without eating or drinking. So long story short, I was browsing some webcam comments for the webcams, and I saw a viewer post one picture of the same bear from early summer and late summer, and they said basically, look how fat this bear got. Something clicked in my mind at that time. I thought, wouldn't it be fun if we tried to see who viewers would pick as the fattest and most successful bear of the year. We put together a one-day event at that time called Fat Bear Tuesday. The engagement on it was extremely high, and then that day I decided to expand it into an entire week, and it's ballooned into the modern version of the 2025 Fat Bear Week.
Okay, but I just have to know. So, like I said, Emma and I have been watching this all morning, but, you know, I'm sure you know, but for the average viewer like us, these bears all look the same. So how do you know which ones are which so that you can follow your bear and root along?
It's like going into a room full of people for the first time. All bears look like bears, right? But when you look at them more closely, you'll see they differ in their facial features, their body size, their coat color, their ear shape, their ear color, their claw color. And they have different dispositions and personalities as well. So you can get to know them on an individual level by watching the webcams. We also have a guide on fatbearweek.org where you can go vote, but there's also a Meet the Bears page there. So there's bios that everyone can read, and then you can go to the webcams to see if any of the Fat Bear Week bears are there. But they're all very distinct in their own way, although it can be difficult to identify them at first.
Especially for us lay people, and lest we root for somebody else's bear. Okay, let's talk about bears in general. We know polar bears are listed as vulnerable on the endangered species chart because of climate change. So how are black bears faring, and is there a concern for their well-being?
Well, with black bears in North America, they are doing very well. Black bears, the North American black bears, are probably the most secure bear species in the world, and there's 8 bear species on Earth. In Katmai National Park, there's only brown bears, and their population is secure. Other parts of the world, however, brown bears aren't doing so well. So there's some highly endangered populations, for instance, like in the Himalayas, even parts of the northern Middle Eastern region, like in Iran, and parts of Europe as well, that are kind of just hanging on right now.
You know, a question about these brown bears and grizzly bears. What's the difference between the two? Are they the same, or are they different for those of us who are bear novices?
All grizzly bears are brown bears, but not all brown bears are grizzly bears, if that makes sense. So grizzly bears are typically considered to be brown bears that live in the interior sections of North America. So think the Rocky Mountains, for instance, going into the Yukon, and then into like interior parts of Alaska. Brown bears are, in North America at least, are the bears that usually have access to coastal food resources. So living on the coast of Alaska or British Columbia. And bears in Katmai National Park are very much coastal brown bears. If you go into Europe and Asia, I think usually people are just calling their brown bears there, even though there can be different subspecies.
Is there a young bear or somebody you have your eye on that you think might take the crown? Do you have a favorite?
This year's bracket in Fat Bear Week is pretty tough. I think a sleeper might be Bear 856. You know, he has never advanced very far in the tournament before, but he was fairly thin in early summer, and he's gotten quite fat by the end of the year. So I'm curious to see how far he goes in the tournament. He'll be in a first-round matchup starting tomorrow.
Oh, I like that. I've made a note. And quickly, where can we vote? Where do we go? I need to know where I'm going next.
Fatbearweek.org is the place to vote. Voting is open now in a couple of first-round matches.
Thank you for joining us this evening for Today As It Happens. I'm Maritza Giorgio. Have a great Tuesday night.